In this video, I'm going to cover the various irregularities surrounding the committee meeting on the 25th of June 2025, where councillors decided whether to grant a new lease of Pensford Field to mental health charity Dose of Nature. The only possible external challenge to a council's actions or decisions is a judicial review. One day before this meeting, the Trust's lawyers sent a pre-action protocol letter to Richmond Council. The Trust made 3 claims, the most important one being that there was apparent bias or predetermination on the decision to award the lease to Dose of Nature.
For the purposes of this meeting, I'm aware that there's been a certain amount of speculation regarding my own personal involvement and allegations of bias, which I entirely refute. However, to ensure that this meeting is conducted in an entirely independent fashion, I will be stepping off the committee for this particular part of the meeting, and Councillor Baldwin will take my place.
In committee meetings, each agenda item has a maximum of 6 public speaker slots, and according to the Constitution, these slots are allocated on a first-come, first-served basis. I managed to get in early and secured the first slot. The next 4 slots were taken by trustees and volunteers of the Trust. This left just 1 slot available. Now, it would have looked very poor for the Council to have 5 out of 6 public speakers opposing its proposal. What could it possibly do to avoid such an embarrassing situation? Well, it simply suspended that part of the Constitution. Within seconds of taking the chair, former Mayor and actor Councillor Nancy Baldwin invited Deputy Leader Councillor Jim Millard, also an actor, to propose a motion delivered from his laptop, reading a script that he most certainly didn't write.
Ordinarily, we would permit public speakers to participate in the order their request to speak has been registered. On this item, we have had considerable public engagement, and the balance of views to oppose and support the recommendation in this report are roughly 60-40. Accordingly, I move that the committee hear views from the registered speakers to broadly accord with that ratio, meaning that we will hear from 4 speakers who oppose the recommendation and 2 speakers who support them.
Bravo! And closed laptop. And so this scripted motion went to a vote.
Okay, so everyone in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. And that is being carried.
Okay, let's pause right there. What we just saw was pure theatre. Because it turns out that the outcome of that vote to interfere with the registered public speakers list had in fact already been actioned by this council officer 5 days earlier on the instruction of Councillor Nancy Baldwin. On the 20th of June, Rachel Williamson, who is the clerk of the Finance Committee, sent this email to the registered public speakers who were associated with the Trust.
To achieve a balanced and fair representation of views, we kindly ask that you organise amongst yourselves and nominate 3 of your number to speak at the meeting on behalf of the Pensford Field Environmental Trust.
Despite publishing a blatantly one-sided report, it's quite hilarious that the council was now claiming it cared about providing balance. This incident reminds me of what one resident said at the community conversation event in September 2024.
As it was, I heard that you were going to force this through the council, so I got to go to the council meeting and speak. I was told that there would be 3 people speaking for it and 3 people speaking against it. When I turned up on the day, you rigged it so that you had 5 people speaking for it, and I was the only person speaking against it.
Is it possible that this interference with the public speakers list was not a one-off occurrence? We also learned before this meeting that opposition councillor Richard Bennett was refused permission to speak on Pensford Field and asked to provide a written statement instead. He was told this submission would form part of the permanent record of the meeting. 9 months later, it is still not published on the council's website, but he sent me a copy, so you can pause and read it here. And so we move on to the 6 public speakers, and I was up first.
Having made over 1 hour of reporting and commenting on this matter across 6 videos on the Richmond Council Watch channel, I can say with confidence that what has happened here is both unjust and undemocratic. This committee should not be sitting here tonight making the latter half of the decision, having played no part in the former decision to terminate the lease, when property matters are the sole responsibility of this committee. I've tried for many months, but never received a satisfactory answer on this point.
The communication with the trust and with residents was handled really badly and could have been done much better. And we all wish that that happened.
As I say, we should have handled it better. We should have handled it better. If we had our time over again, would I have changed it? Yes, of course. It was a mistake.
Please do not be fooled by the false claims of mistakes or unfortunate events by the leadership. No mistakes were made. The process for getting to this point was meticulously planned and deliberate. On the 1st of October, Councillor Roberts said,
As long as people are not going to see any difference in how they are able to enjoy Pensford Field, the actual allocation of the lease shouldn't be important.
but in fact the name on this lease was so important to this administration that it was prepared to lose the entire support of the local party in Kew and create a huge amount of distress and upset with the Pensford Field volunteers. Isn't that extraordinary?
In 33 years, the field has been transformed from school playing field to a biodiversity hotspot, where species-rich mixed woodland, wildflower meadows and a wildlife pond support a healthy population of birds, insects, bats and amphibians. For the last decade, the field has been awarded the Green Flag and London in Bloom's Best Small Conservation Site Awards. This is proof positive of its value as a sanctuary for nature. Under charity law, Dose of Nature isn't allowed to spend money on conservation. Its objective is the relief of sickness through the provision of programmes of engagement with nature to treat mental health issues. Nowhere in its objects is mention of the preservation of the natural environment.
On the point of the structures, we know that Dose of Nature have come to us to create large structures in the field which we rejected. And we know that Dose of Nature have said that such structures are fundamental to their future use of the field. Without them, it isn't an ideal space. We know that the council knows that Dose of Nature wishes to build these structures. And we know who does not know, and who do not know are the public or yourselves, because it doesn't appear in any of your briefing documents.
It's an awful lot of effort you do put in, and I do sympathise with the point made about, I think, by the previous speakers about, this has been a big emotional journey and a big issue. But are you suggesting that basically once this lease is awarded a Dose of Nature, there'll be no more volunteering from the community?
Note that Councillor Phil Giesler said once this lease is awarded to Dose of Nature, not if.
If the termination goes ahead, then Pensford Field Environmental Trust will be dissolved and will no longer exist. And it'll be up to individuals to, but it won't be organised by anybody centrally. And Pensford Field Environmental Trust is a trust that manages the land on behalf of all of the users. It's not one of the users managing for everybody else.
Members of this committee have been sent a copy of the Judicial Review Pre-Action Protocol letter. This letter gives numerous examples when the council indicated in public, in this chamber and in private to us, that it had already made a decision to award a lease to Dose of Nature. But then in mid-March, this position suddenly changed. Once the council finally accepted, it first had to place a notice inviting objections before taking a decision.
Can you see any alternative paths forward that you think would allow the trust to continue protecting the biodiversity of this land whilst helping Dose of Nature to continue meeting the objectives that they have for the future?
Probably the point where we couldn't agree is on structures. And that could be a real fundamental block. We were told, as I said in the letter, that the mind was made up and the lease would be awarded to Dose of Nature. And that was the end of the discussion at meeting after meeting, we were told the decision has been made.
I've had a long career in the charity sector and have been a trustee of Dose of Nature for 2 years and a local resident for over 20 years. We recognise the huge importance of Pensford Field to the local community and have great admiration for the volunteers who created and sustained this wonderful green space in Kew. We share the same desire to protect this unique natural space and enhance its biodiversity, whilst at the same time wanting to make it accessible to the whole community. We have long considered ourselves an environmental charity as well as a mental health charity.
There's been quite a lot of talk this evening about how you don't have the skill set within the organisation or the remit within the charity that you run at the moment. I just wanted to understand a little bit more from you about how we can reconcile that.
We have made an application to the Charity Commission. This went in a number of weeks ago. We're just waiting to have confirmation to add that as a job object to our charity.
9 months later, there is no change to Dose of Nature's objectives, according to the Charity Commission.
I'm just deeply saddened by the way this whole affair has been handled by the administration at this council. I think it's been bungled, and I think it's been an appalling mess, frankly. So that is what's behind the tenor of the comments that you've heard from me tonight.
My name's Alison Greenwood and I'm a Doctor of Psychology and founder of Dose of Nature. I'm open to any questions the committee may have about the proposal to grant the lease to Dose of Nature to enable us to retain it as a whole community resource and also help more people than our limited access currently permits. The words of our GPs and our clients are, however, the most important evidence I feel I can give this committee this evening.
So does anyone have any questions for Councillor Wren?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alison. I'm a fellow psychology graduate myself. Why ask for the lease, though? I mean, we've heard that, you wanted to increase your usage of the field so that you could do more great work. Why not just ask council to have a word and facilitate, mediate a conversation if you felt that the conversations weren't going the way that you wanted? Why ask for the lease? It doesn't seem to stack up.
A very reasonable and important question, but it was followed by an extraordinary moment where Councillor Nancy Baldwin flailed around, seemingly intoxicated by her temporary chairship, in an attempt to shut the question down.
Can I come in here just a moment? I'm a little bit uncomfortable about going into the past. Fair enough. Question, what happened with it just gets a little bit, yeah. I'm really wanting to focus on what we've got here in front of us rather than what happened in the past.
It seemed to have then dawned on her that Alison Greenwood may say something helpful to the council's cause, so her objection was swiftly retracted.
Actually, I see where you're going with this, so I'm going to let it go. Sorry, I'm apologize there. Go ahead. I feel like Judge Judy at the moment. Go ahead.
Now watch out for Alison Greenwood's slip of the tongue in her overly gushing response.
I'm happy to answer that question, actually. That there is, at the risk of also going into the past, there is a history here, which perhaps isn't. I'm happy to answer any questions specifically. But this is for 4 years we have not wanted to go to the council, specifically been attempting to work in collaboration with the current Pensford Field trustees, because as we've heard today, they are the experts and have created this beautiful space that we all love. And I think that's one thing that the whole room shares. This is a very beautiful space and it has been created by volunteers over a period of 30 years and is exceptionally beautiful. And we would not want to have gone to the council behind, we wanted to work collaboratively.
The phrase that Alison Greenwood was going to say, but stopped mid-track, was gone to the council behind the back of the trust. I recall that she took great exception to me calling Dose of Nature's sneaky behaviour out in previous videos, yet here she is, confirming exactly what her charity did. During the public speakers, the monitoring officer stumbled his way through a statement on the pre-action protocol letter.
You can and should determine this the recommendations in this report entirely on the merits that are presented to you today. If you cannot make that decision, then that lends credence to the suggestion that there is predetermination or bias. I've certainly seen no evidence of that, so my advice to you, members, is that you can make that decision, provided you're satisfied that you have sufficient information to do so.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Millard.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say, I for one am genuinely not predetermined or biased. I think this is a really important process to try and go through in detail, as I think we all do.
OK, let's pause again. When I heard Councillor Millard say that he was genuinely not predetermined or biased, I remembered that he'd commented on decisions made in a response to one of my public questions 3 months earlier. So while the meeting continued, I opened my laptop and managed to find the clip.
Look, it was a really difficult decision for the council to make, and it was difficult for us to deliberate on in the decision-informing process. But it was clear there was unanimous support that it was the right decision in terms of supporting Dose of Nature to continue and expand their provision for mental health services in the borough.
No predetermination or bias, huh?
I've certainly seen no evidence of that.
The monitoring officer's memory must be failing him, because he was certainly present at that full council meeting where Councillor Millard made that statement. He was also present at these 2 earlier meetings where Councillor Roberts made it very clear that the council had predetermined it would award the lease to Dose of Nature.
So that's why we find ourselves in a position of approaching the Pensford Field Trust, asking for a cessation of their lease and an award of the lease to Dose of Nature.
I've certainly seen no evidence of that.
Mr. Smith asks whether the beekeepers and hives will be welcome. Yes, they will continue to be welcome when the lease transfers to Dose of Nature.
Absolutely no predetermination or bias.
I've certainly seen no evidence of that.
So, bearing in mind the heightened legal sensitivity around this agenda item, I asked Democratic Services Officer Nicholas Garland to step outside the council chamber for a little chat. I played him the clip of Councillor Millard at the full council meeting in March from my laptop and suggested that he raise these previous statements with the monitoring officer because I believed Councillor Millard may wish to join Councillor Roberts in recusing himself. Nicholas Garland told me, quote, "You've had your time to speak," end quote, and refused to raise my concern. I asked him to confirm that he was refusing to speak to the monitoring officer about this matter, and he said yes. I returned to the council chamber. The session continued for a while longer and then stopped for a break, where the public were asked to leave the room because the next part will be a closed session to discuss the so-called confidential aspects of the lease. But we noticed that Councillor Millard was still standing outside in the corridor. After 20 minutes of closed session, we were called back in for the debate section. Councillor Millard was no longer present.
Now, if we could please move on to the debate. Do I have anyone who would like to speak? Questions? Councillor Wren, please.
Thank you, Chair. And should we explain Councillor Millard's absence?
Thank you. Good reminder. Councillor Millard has recused himself from this debate because he's worried that he might be considered He just recused himself, apparently. That's all I have to say.
Indeed. We all know Councillor Baldwin started saying predetermined before the monitoring officer reined her in.
I can't vote against the ability to serve the mental health needs of 500 people, for all the reasons that people have talked about. And I was greatly reassured by the estimate of only an extra 4 people a week. But I also can't vote for something that the trustees who have built this asset and know it better than anybody say they believe is going to damage the biodiversity of this important site. And I think overall this council doesn't place enough priority on wildlife and biodiversity, and I've said that in many other meetings. So I cannot vote for that on those grounds. I find myself quite conflicted and I am going to have to abstain.
In this extraordinary meeting, the leader and deputy leader both recused themselves and were left to pace the corridors of York House, while their 6 remaining Lib Dem colleagues acted as if they were open-minded. and then of course voted to approve the grant of lease to Dose of Nature. Councillor Nancy Baldwin delivered her final, unconvincing stab in the back.
Can I say something very, very heartfelt to all of you? You have given up so much time and energy into this, and I can only salute you all for your public spiritedness and everything you've done, and to help us try to come to a decision. And so I thank you very much for that. So thank you.
After the meeting, I spoke to Nicholas Garland, who confirmed that he had in fact raised my concern, despite refusing to do so to my face. I imagine that the impending threat of legal action that didn't in the end materialise rather focused his thoughts. Thanks very much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done already, and I'll see you next time.